Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started with today's presentation. Today's session is being recorded, so we will be sending out the recording to anyone that has registered. And again, today we'll be focusing on kind of some DIBCAC successes that we've recently had, and we'll be giving hopefully everyone that's attending just some guidelines and some guidance on how to best prepare should you be going in front of DIBCAC and or just preparing, for the CMMC journey. Next slide, please. So with me today are Gregg Laroche, our VP of Product Management, Noel Vestal, who's recently joined us to lead our compliance efforts, and I'll be moderating today's session. I'm the Director of Channel Sales here at PreVeil. And for the agenda today, we're going to be covering DIBCAC do's and don'ts. This is based on our firsthand experience, both with a candidate C3PAO DIBCAC audit, as well as a customer NIST 800-171 DIBCAC high audit experience. We'll be going over some resources that you should be leveraging for success. We'll talk about how we can help accelerate the compliance process with PreVeil, and then what steps should you be looking to take to get through that last mile, and we'll finish with Q&A. I expect us to be done inside of 30 minutes, but we'll have plenty of time for Q&A as needed. And we do want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, please feel free to bring them up as we're going through. We want to make this, something that's very valuable. We appreciate you taking the time out to learn about our experiences. And obviously, we want to make sure that, this is something that's worth your time as well. So don't hesitate to ask questions, and we'll be sure to get through them. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Noel, and she'll take you through some of the DIBCAC do's and don'ts.
Thanks, Jamie. So we recently, like Jamie just referenced, we recently were able to work with one of our C3PAO candidate partners who was going through a DIBCAC assessment. And there were some really good lessons learned that came out of that. And we wanted to make sure to have a chance to share that with all of you. The biggest one, and this is probably not going to be a big surprise to most of the C3PAO candidates out there, robust documentation was critical. Most of the items that sort of tripped up the C3PAO candidate had to do with documentation. The most important thing is aligning your policies with your procedures. That was one of the biggest issues that this particular candidate had, and I think a lot of others will as well. Making sure that your policies, what you say you're doing, and then your procedures, how you're actually doing it, line up succinctly, and making sure that that is documented everywhere it needs to be documented, what you're doing and how you are doing it, so that the auditor can say, okay, this is what we see that you're saying you're doing. Here are the procedures, here are the processes that are actually doing that and executing that policy. And also, this was a customer of PreVeil. So they used all of our CRM information in their SSP, and those controls supported, what 84 controls that we support definitely made a huge difference for the C3PAO and for their audits with the DIBCAC. Any questions or clarifications anybody needs? Okay, next slide, please. Some of the don'ts. Phipps is a big one. That is something that's become much more prevalent in the CMMC 2.0 universe. Again, this same candidate had some issues come up having to do with Phipps 140-2 certified security assets. In particular, there were specific assets they were using in their offices that were not Phipps 140-2 validated. All security assets have to be Phipps 140-2 validated. CSRM is required, as is FedRAMP, ATO, or moderate equivalency. That's not negotiable. That is obviously part of DFAR 7012, but it is something that they are going to ask for. We certainly were asked to validate that we had our FedRAMP moderate equivalency and a body of evidence to support that we had that. So that's an important distinction to remember as well. And also, they did not do it alone, and we definitely don't suggest that anybody does try to do it alone. You want to work with the people who have success in navigating the DIBCAC, us at PreVeil, and then all of our partner network as well. Next slide, please.
Noel, could you expand upon what a body of evidence means for
Yes,
FedRAMP?
absolutely. So in this case, the body of evidence we supplied was our SSP, and that was not enough. We actually had to give them the body of evidence that we got from our FedRAMP moderate equivalency audit. So it was an SAP, and it was that body of evidence, basically what the 3PAO who came in and assessed us, what they found, what were the things we were meeting, or what did we have to work on, that kind of thing. So that was the body of evidence that they were actually looking for.
Great. And we did have a question come in around Phipps 140-2 validation. Is that for Wi-Fi access points as well?
My understanding from the C3PAO is yes. And in this particular case, it was their firewall and everything having kind of to do with that. So it wouldn't surprise me if those were listed as well, but I can't tell you specifically that they would be, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Thanks.
Sure. Any other questions?
None at this time.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jamie. All right, next slide, please. And I will turn this over to Gregg.
All right, thanks, Noel. I'm going to very quickly go through a true story. Like we've been saying, these are based on real experiences with PreVeil customers and partners. And, kind of very quickly, I'm going to go through a methodology that this customer experienced that we believe is very repeatable. And we think that a lot of companies are in this boat and could benefit from this approach and have a similar excellent outcome that this company experienced. And I'm just going to go through the kind of the elements of that. There's more detail in a case study that you can download from our website. But this is, a mid-sized company that was, informed by DIBCAC that they were going to be assessed against 800-171. This was part of their regular contract, DFARS requirements. And this, kind of really has nothing to do with CMMC, except that the requirements are very similar in that they had to require to meet their 110 controls in the 14 practice areas to protect CUI. And that was the scope of this audit. So at first, they started looking at publications that were available. What is the assessment methodology the auditors are going to follow? What documentation can I get from PreVeil? I'm a PreVeil user. I keep all my CUI in PreVeil. So they made use of our SSP template, our customer responsibility matrix template, the POAM that comes with that, which is really the things that PreVeil does not directly cover and what's left over, and the policy templates as well. And really as a head start to get the documentation going and identify where they're at. We recommended they engage obviously with a PreVeil partner as a consultant to help them with this step, and they did so. So they engaged with a PreVeil partner who helped them through their documentation and got them ready, and also helped them interact with the audit team that was assigned to them as a company. So we were involved in recommending that partner, and just FYI, for those of you not familiar with how NIST 800-171 is scored under SPRS, you start off with a -203 if you have 0 things implemented, and then you work your way up through the negative field and into the positive, and up to a maximum possible score of 110. So we're going to go through that. All right, next slide. So then, we added PreVeil to this environment, and that gives us a leg up on a lot of the NIST 800-171 controls to varying degrees. Some controls, as you'd see in our CRM document, are met entirely by PreVeil. Some of them are met partially and need additional policies and documentation. So basically you deploy the product, you set up the corresponding policies that describe how you use the product and how you protect CUI in your environment with your customer. And then those documents have to match what you're actually doing. And that's kind of the basis for the program, and a good starting point. It covers a lot of ground. It allows you to keep your commercial clouds in place, like Microsoft 365 commercial, because the CUI is not touching that system when you use PreVeil. And also it's very affordable because you only buy what you need to build out your CUI enclave. So this was a business decision that made a lot of sense for this customer. And as a result, we estimate that when you deploy PreVeil and all the related documentation required to describe how you use PreVeil and how you protect CUI, you can get yourself all the way up to a score of plus 40 approximately, and that's by creating a CUI enclave using PreVeil. So that's a good move. It allows you to control the scope of your audit, which is very beneficial, and it also provides the best security you can get out there with end-to-end encryption and zero trust architecture. So you save lots of time because you're getting a lot of technology coverage with one solution, but you're also getting a step up on your documentation, and you also don't have to migrate all your data to a new domain and give everybody a new email address and do all these disruptive things. So, and next slide, we'll talk about what's left. So what we call the final mile, right? So how did this vendor get from there to their 110 score? That's the punchline. I'm burying the lead a little. The lead is this particular PreVeil customer was assessed with a 110 score by DIBCAC. So that's really a really encouraging proof point that any company, these guys are a small company, they implemented PreVeil, they hired a PreVeil partner as a consultant, they got busy getting their documentation in order, and then when DIBCAC came in to assess them, they were successful. So part of that was identifying the 26 controls that PreVeil doesn't touch at all, and then 13 points is all about your endpoints and getting the right endpoint controls in place for any endpoint that processes CUI. There's 10 points available for documenting policies and procedures outside of the things PreVeil touches. There's 3 points available for training, so making sure your employees understand security and vulnerability and threats and all that good stuff. And so they use the expert help that was available to them. They documented all their program extremely thoroughly, and their implementation of the program matched their documentation. That's something Noel said earlier, which is really important. The documentation is something DIBCAC was reading every single line, every document, every word, and they were looking for evidence that proved that you were actually implementing the documented program that you described. So that's something you can spend a lot of energy making sure you get right. So that was good. So, and our partner was very instrumental in getting that outcome. So we believe, again, that this is something that any company can achieve, working with the existing tools that are out there, expertise that is already available in our market, and excellent products that can cover a lot of the technology aspects of compliance. So that's all I had, I think. And I don't know if there's one more slide. Yeah, this was really just a summary. So all of this on one slide. So having, this is the approach we think is repeatable and will be very successful for your customers out there, as practitioners and C3PAOs and consultants and MSPs, whatever your business model is, your customers are going to be pursuing compliance. And this is a methodology that can help them all be successful, and we have proof. So it's a very powerful story, and we're really excited to tell it over and over again. So you'll be hearing a lot about us in these areas in the coming months, and how we're gonna, present this kind of 3-step road to success. So yeah, thanks. I appreciate everyone's time today. I'm gonna hand over to Jamie for some closing comments and wrap up with any questions we might have.
Thanks, Greg. So one of the questions that came up is about how long did it take the customer, specifically the customer that went through the DIBCAC audit, to get to a point where they felt confident that they could pass the audit?
Yeah, that's a good question. In this particular case, the customer got out of the gate a little slow, but they were given a lot of advance notice by DIBCAC. I think DIBCAC gave them 9 months notice advance. And so they thought they had a long time, and they kind of didn't do a lot for the first couple of months. And then they hit, then they got to the point where there were only 6 months left till their audit, and that's when they kind of reached out for help and got a partner involved. So towards the end, so the whole cycle ran 9 months, but they were probably only building the program and documenting it I would say in earnest, the last 4 months of that. So if I had to handicap their time frame, I'd say they did it in 4 months. And they could have gone faster even, except for the fact in this case the customer was really starting with nothing. They had no program, they had no SSP, they had nothing in place. So they were really starting from scratch.
Great. And were there any major differences between the C3PAO audit versus the customer audit that you could explain more?
Yeah, I think, based on the anecdotes that we heard from the two experiences, for one thing for sure is the C3PAO assessment had a much bigger team. So the DIBCAC team that assessed the C3PAO was 14 auditors, and that's not a typo, 14. And so, and then the assessment team that assessed our company here under NIST was 5. So there's a big difference in the team that was used. The methodology obviously was different because the NIST audit was following 171A, and the C3PAO audit was following the CMMC assessment guide. So, there are slight differences there in terms of evidence and how much evidence you need for each control and how control objectives are considered in the process. But essentially, they have the same goal, right? So the audit in both cases were, how are you implementing the 110 controls, and is your program up to snuff? And so they may have taken kind of slightly different nuances to get there, but in the end, it's the same set of requirements. So that's one thing you can take away is if you get a 110 score on a DIBCAC assessment for NIST 800, you can be very confident you're in very good shape for CMMC level 2 because it's the same requirement. And a C3PAO candidate could come in and look at the same program and get you, very likely reach the same conclusion that DIBCAC did. Right?
That's a great point. Thanks for that, Greg. Any other questions? We have plenty of time to answer any more questions you may have about DIBCAC, about the process, about PreVeil. Not seeing any other questions come in. Give it maybe one more minute.
Yeah, and while we're waiting, I think another thought that comes to mind, as these companies have gone through these experiences and we've seen the rigor applied to their programs by these assessment methodologies, I would say if you're advising your customers as partners and key resources and IT providers to these folks, they shouldn't be waiting. They should be starting out on this endeavor because there's a lot to it, and folks should not be sitting on their heels and saying, well, CMMC is not going to be in contracts for a year. Why, what am I worried about? I think you should be advising your customers to get started because this is no small task.
I think you're totally right, Greg. And to piggyback on that, I know that our C3PAO candidate that went through the DIBCAC audit, they started a year ago with all of their documentation and to get everything in place. So yeah, it makes sense to start now. If it is going to become, final in the next year, this is the time to get started, and you don't want to wait, definitely.
Yeah, especially because there'll likely be a bottleneck, as there always is once things do kick off. So getting ahead of the game certainly makes sense.
Definitely.
A couple questions have come in. One, we'll give our best answer. I don't know that this is our area of expertise, but then a second one, certainly we can answer. So the first one is any guidance on best practices for endpoint protection controls?
Yeah, I feel like that's probably not the best thing for us to answer, but Greg, I'll let you take that if you want to provide any further feedback.
Sure, and the key point is here. There's a lot of different ways you can establish an endpoint for a CUI, and they might be physical machines, they might be VDI instances. There's a lot of different ways to attack the endpoint itself. And then once you have that established as a decision, a technology decision, then you're really going to think about, well, what controls are required on this kind of endpoint, and as I'm accessing CUI from there. And there's a lot of controls that touch the endpoint. There's access control that you have to consider. There's logging. There's requirements for hard drive encryption. There's requirements for authentication. There's requirements for a whole bunch of specific controls that apply directly to the endpoints. And so, PreVeil is also running on that endpoint. So part of the shared responsibility involves, how the COI is managed and protected from the endpoint to the cloud and back again. But then there are all these other endpoint requirements that also have to be there as kind of a shared responsibility. So I can't really give you too much guidance on best practice, because it's going to be a whole set of endpoint controls that are more or less off-the-shelf technologies and approaches that IT professionals know how to do. It just is, you just have to implement them, improve it to the auditor. So that's kind of what I would say for that.
Thanks, Greg. And then there was a question, what's the process for getting your FedRAMP equivalent documentation? So the way I'm going to read that question is they're looking to access what PreVeil has available, and hopefully that's the correct way this question was phrased. I don't know if they're asking more generally what is considered FedRAMP equivalent documentation. But as far as PreVeil goes, we do have a letter of attestation from an accredited 3PAO, a FedRAMP 3PAO. We're happy to share that. Just send me an email and I can send you that. We also have an email directly from the CISO of the DoD that stated that our approach to FedRAMP moderate equivalency would be sufficient. In this particular case, DIBCAC wanted additional documentation, which we can share under NDA in a limited capacity. So 99% of the time, our letter of attestation should be sufficient. But if you run into a particular instance where you've got a really tough auditor, they want additional documentation, we're more than happy to work with you in a one-off basis on that. And a couple other questions have come in. Budget range for customer implementation, for the customer implementation example. Greg, were they around 100 seats, that customer?
Yeah, less than that, but right around there. And
yeah. Yeah, we don't have visibility into their overall budget for the project, and that would certainly be something under NDA with them. But they did, I believe, licensed around 50 seats of PreVeil, something like that.
Yep, and then they engaged a partner as a consultant to help them through the final stages of that project, probably the last couple of months. And so I'm not aware of how many hours that came to in terms of billing time, but that would be about the time frame.
Yep. Yeah, if you want more specifics around that, feel free to send me an email and we can take that one offline. Question about, do we include a responsibility matrix that can show the controls we inherit from PreVeil? Yes, we do have a customer responsibility, shared responsibility matrix available. You can email us and we can get that over to you. A question came in, will your FedRAMP accreditation support the customer who needs a CSP to run their enclave? This assumes the customer needs an enclave as part of their CMMC.
It's an interesting wording. I'm kind of interpreting that to mean, I'm not sure where the storing of CUI fits into this, but I'm imagining it's implied that we're storing the CUI in PreVeil, and that PreVeil is a CSP in the sense that we provide cloud storage in the AWS GovCloud for the encrypted CUI data. So I guess, so then if I take one more step back from that logic, will our FedRAMP accreditation support that customer? The short answer is yes, but the longer answer is FedRAMP accreditation is not what we have, right? So in order to be accredited under FedRAMP and show up on the FedRAMP marketplace, you have to be selling directly to a government agency. They have to sponsor you. You then go through an authority to operate process that culminates in a 3PAO auditing your program and giving you an SAR that then is submitted to the FedRAMP folks, and they review it, and then they give you the ATO, right? Now, if you don't sell to the government, like PreVeil, we don't sell to the government, so we have no sponsor, and we don't show up in the FedRAMP marketplace. But that's not a big problem, because DFARS 7012 clearly says that you have to be FedRAMP moderate or equivalent to FedRAMP moderate. And so our FedRAMP program, it was built from the ground up to basically to meet the requirements of getting an ATO without the actual ATO. And so we had the 3PAO come in and audit us as if we were going to go for an ATO and give us a letter of attestation and an SAR and all the same things that an ATO company would do, but we just did them out of band because we can't get an ATO because we don't sell to the government directly. So at least not yet. So so are we ready for an ATO? Absolutely. Does what we did meet the requirement? Absolutely. Do we have a letter from the DoD CISO that says that? Absolutely. So you can be very confident that our approach was accepted and acceptable, and so that, you know, on the FedRAMP front.
I think it's maybe worth expounding upon that too, because as Gregg mentioned, we went through a lot of external accreditation and external assessments to get our attestation. Even though we leverage AWS GovCloud, which does have a FedRAMP ATO, we cannot inherit that ATO. So it is important, if you work with a CSP, that they have gone through some sort of third-party validation, not that they just run a service within a FedRAMP certified cloud, because they're not necessarily going to inherit. In fact, they won't inherit any FedRAMP ATO on their own. They need to do the work themselves also.
That's a great point.
Something about data sovereignty for ITAR. Did your clients that passed DIBCAC audit house ITAR in PreVeil and the AWS GovCloud? So the answer here is that all of our defense customers are in AWS GovCloud, which does give them data sovereignty. However, specifically for ITAR, there's also something called the ITAR encryption carve-out, which PreVeil, by the way that we provide true end-to-end encryption, meets the requirements for the ITAR encryption carve-out, which then negates the need for data sovereignty. So we do kind of double up on that because we are leveraging AWS GovCloud anyways, but we don't necessarily need to meet data sovereignty because of the way that we meet the ITAR encryption carve-out, which we can get you more information on that. If just shoot me an email. We've got a white paper on that that'll bring up the specific rule and tie it back to how we meet that requirement. Great questions. We have a few more minutes if we have any other questions. Okay, I think we can go ahead and wrap up this session. Really appreciate everyone's time. Again, if you have any other follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. I can get you in touch with our team, of course. If you have any documentation requirements, again, just reach out to me directly at jamie@preveil.com. And otherwise, appreciate the time, Gregg, the time, Noel, and appreciate everyone that joined us for this session. Hopefully this was something valuable. We're looking to do more partner-only, partner-specific events. We're also going to be rebranding the PreVeil Partner Program into more of a partner community, get more engagement going with our partner ecosystem, which is well over 100 partners today, and a great mix of consultants and MSPs and resellers and C3PAO candidates. So looking to take advantage of that. If you do have any feedback or thoughts on how we can enhance and improve the partner experience, please feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and close this up, and we will be sending out a copy of the recording as well.